Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry. We'll begin with our normal Dvar Torah. There's also a thought here that was raised, maybe to say some words, maybe instead of the Dvar Torah. We'll see. We have to discuss this. To teach the Tefillah, actually, because many of us pray day in, day out, routinely, and there are sometimes words we don't understand, and sometimes concepts. It's more important to learn what lies behind the words. Maybe that's a good idea. Instead of the weekly Dvar Torah, we could do a portion of the Tefillah line, a few words of the Tefillah as we go along, and study some in depth the meaning of what we're saying, and that will strengthen our connection to Tefillah, connection to Hashem, and so on. That's a nice idea, something food for thought. So we'll see. As of next week, maybe we'll switch to that. That's how I used to teach in the men's Sunday morning shir. We used to do each time a line or two of tefillah, and then do halacha. So it has to be kept, of course, short in order to enable most of the time to leave for halacha. But that's a nice idea to switch the Dvar Torah to understanding our tefillah more in depth. Okay, very good. Chani's idea, thank you. Okay, so we'll still say Dvar Torah today regarding Parashat Chukat, which we laid 2 days ago. So there was a question that someone asked me last week about the Parsha. It was very interesting the way I'd answered the question to him immediately. And another person who had asked that same question to, of the ultra Haredi world of what they call the Peleg Yerushalmi. It's a person that he learns with, so he asked him the same question. And the answer that his Haredi Chavruta gave was totally in the opposite direction of what the answer I had given him. And then after all that, I heard a third answer, which is sort of parv in between. So the question was, when Am Yisrael were about to enter Eretz Yisrael, in 2 days ago was Parsha, we had the passing away of Miriam and Aaron, and now they're prepared to enter Eretz Yisrael. Then unfortunately, there was Chet Mea Meriva, which stopped Moshe Rabbeinu from continuing on into Israel. But this week's, 2 days ago's Parsha Chukat is actually a leap over 38 years from Korach. Parsha before Korach had still been within the 2 first years of Am Yisrael in the desert. And the passing of Miriam was on the 40th year. It's hard to, we don't see that when you read the Parsha straight through, but we know that that's what occurred. And Miriam passed away the 40th year. The beginning of the 40th year, Nisan, sometime during Nisan of the first days of the 40th year. And then within a year, Moshe and Aaron passed away. Moshe in the end by Adar, Zayin Adar. Aaron was around the same time as Miriam. And then almost close to a year later, Zayin Adar is when Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. And then Am Yisrael come into Israel on Nisan, Yud Nisan, 33 days after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. So the question that was in discussion, the Jews were led by the Ananei Kavod. All those 40 years that they spent in the desert, the Ananei Kavod led the Jews to wherever they needed to go. They were the ways of the Jews then, directed them in the right route to go through the desert in every stop, and then continuing, and so on. And besides that, they also cleared the way. There was no hills and valleys, rather the Ananei Kavod flattened the land. It should be smooth and easy for the Jews to walk through the desert. And besides that, they also did the laundry for them, and they did the ironing for them, and the shoes were kept perfect and well all the years. So really it ironed out everything for the Jewish people and also killed all the snakes and scorpions. There was nothing, there was no issue at all. They were all totally spoiled by Enei Kavod, and of course receiving the water from the Be'er and receiving the man. So it was all done for them. Says so the question that was horizon was the fact that upon finally deciding that finally reaching the point where they should be entering Eretz Yisrael, so seemingly the Enei Kavod are still leading them towards Eretz Yisrael, and then they ask Edom, "Can we please pass through your country, through your land?" And it says, "Vayimayin Edom." Edom refuses to let them go through. So the question is, how is it possible that Enei Kavod seemingly made a mistake here? Until now, the ways was working perfectly. Suddenly the Enei Kavod turn left, if you could call it that way, turn west from where they were surrounding the eastern border, southern eastern border of Eretz Yisrael. They were surrounding at that time. And then they were about to turn west to enter Eretz Yisrael through Edom. And here they get blocked. They're stopped. So it's as if the ways takes you to a dead end. You can't continue. You have to go back and surround and roundabout. So what happened here for the first time that sort of seemingly made a mistake here, leading them in the wrong direction. So
their ways wasn't working.
yeah, there's no reception at that point. Yeah. So what happened here? So the a possible answer, which I gave to the person who asked me immediately then, was based on the Rav HaRav's idea of what happened really at that time of this turnover of the generation that is now the second generation, not the one that come out of Egypt, rather the ones that are coming into Eretz Yisrael. That turnover, says Rav HaRav, he explains the complaint of the second generation to the fact that they don't have water. There was also in Parashat Chukat, when Miriam passes away, the water goes away, the well disappears because it was all due to her and her merit that they received the water all the 40 years, and the moment she dies, there's no more water. Their complaint there seems like the same complaint as their ancestors, their parents' generation, where they also complained there's no water in the very beginning of the 40 years. They also complained no water, and Hashem then commanded Moshe Rabbeinu to hit the rock, v'ikita batzur, and then they got water. Says Rav HaRav, there's a very, very great difference between the two complaints. One was negative and one was positive. The first one of the parents' generation was negative. They were saying, "Nitna rosh v'nashur mitzrayma, lama yiretunu mimitzrayim." Why we come out of Egypt in order to die because no water, lack of water, and to die in the desert? That's why he took us out. Let's go back to Egypt. That's a very negative attitude and disbelief, and not relying on Hashem to rescue them. On the other hand, this second generation of children, they were saying, "We have no water. We want to go to a place where there's gefen, te'ena, v'rimon." Said in the psukim themselves, they say, "We want to enter a place where there's gefen, te'ena, v'rimon," meaning they really wish to come into Eretz Yisrael already. They're fed up with the desert, not because of it being dry and no water, but because of the fact that they're receiving everything from Hashem. They wish now to enter Eretz Yisrael and work for their own supply and create a country, to create something that's led by human beings and perfected, and the progress made by human beings and not miraculous like in the desert. That's what they're complaining about. Let's go forward, not backwards. It's a totally opposite attitude than their parents. Much more positive, the way it should be. And therefore Hashem commands Moshe Rabbeinu this time, "V'dibartem el hasela v'natan meimav." Speak to the rock, and it's going to give out its water. It's still a miracle, but it's a totally different attitude of a leader. Instead of hitting, which is to force them to continue, here it's to speak to them. Oh, you want to come into Eretz Yisrael? Let's understand why. Let's understand if it's exact timing now. It's much more human. It's much more with their strength and powers and talents that they're led now, not just as a bunch of slaves who are complaining and don't want to do anything. So, and therefore the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu is really the fact that he hit the rock instead of speaking to it, is really the deeper understanding of it is that Moshe Rabbeinu is not the type of leader that's meant to bring them into Eretz Yisrael. He was excellent and the best leader possible in the desert or taking them out of Egypt, because that's more of a miraculous type of leadership. That's when Hashem takes care of us. But when it comes to leading the people into Eretz Yisrael where they do it on their own, so to speaking, that's not Moshe Rabbeinu anymore. He's too close to Hashem. He's too much above materialistical and normal life issues. That's Yeshua. Yeshua is the one receiving the life from Moshe Rabbeinu, but yet very connected to human regular life. So according to all that, we could say that the Ananei Kavod, leading them, this came after the fact that they were turning west to try to enter Eretz Yisrael. That came after Miriam passing away and no water, and after the hitting of the rock. So we can answer the question: how come the way the Ananei Kavod led them in the wrong way? It wasn't really the wrong way, because from now on, the people desire to be on their own. If you desire to be on your own, so now you're confronted with challenges that weren't there before, because until then it was miraculous. Hashem was leading them. From now on, they wished to be more on their own, more independent. If you want to be independent, then this is how human regular life works. Sometimes you get a refusal, sometimes you can go through, and sometimes you have to fight your way through. Battling Sichon, Ve'og. It was necessary now as a normal nation that has to do things on their own with independence. So it was again the positive side of their new type of procedure, that doing it independently caused the situation to be of that there is need to fight their way through or be challenged by all kinds of situations, normal daily situations. So that's one way to understand what happened here, that the Ananei Kavod sort of led them in the wrong way. The other way, which again was given to the same person by an ultra Haredi Charusa of his, who said 180 degrees opposite. He quoted a midrash that tells us that it was a sin of the Jewish people to attempt to go through Edom. And due to that sin, they lost Ananei Kavod, which meant they lost Aaron. Because Aaron was the one that in his merit, they had Ananei Kavod all the 40 years. What was their sin? Because they attempted to go through Edom, which were Rishaim, that made them lose Ananei Kavod. So really that means that they were meant to follow Ananei Kavod in a different direction. Ananei Kavod did not take them through Edom. And at that point, they veered away from the route that Ananei Kavod were taking them. That's according to that midrash. They didn't obey the direction, going in the direction, the leadership of Ananei Kavod. Further north, and then west, and then turn west. Above Edom, by Sichon Ve'og, where in the end they did go, and they fought them and went in. I guess Edom was the epitome of evil, of cruelty then, from Esav, coming down from Esav. So they most probably had like sort of eagerness to enter Eretz Yisrael as quick as possible. But the way this person answered was he sees it as a sin. He should have continued to follow the Neder Kavod. And according to what we said, it's exactly according to using based on Rav HaRav's idea of the whole situation of the second generation. Then it's the exact opposite. It's showing independence, which is the proper way to continue the progress of the Jewish people at that point was really to become more independent. So you can look at it in two opposite ways, which also lead to. Yes, they were in the 40th year, within the 40th year, right? Yeah, it was the proper timing in general. But do we see this as a sin, or do we see this as a positive attempt to do the things on your own? And that's how we also view today all that's going on with Zionism and all that. It's the exact same difference. So it's amazing how it came out like naturally from in two different directions, dependent on our way of thinking today of what goes on in our land, in our country today, how we view things. Correct. Oh. Right, but sometimes free choice is against Hashem's will, and we can't just do against Hashem's will. Here we're saying, right. Right, so that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that in this case, it was positive, the fact that they tried and attempted to go into Eretz Yisrael. Exactly like your point. It's a positive step of theirs to be in that stage of being able to try independently to enter the country. Okay, and then finally, there's another answer, which I'll say very, very briefly, based on what Amy just said now, that free choice, free will, is something that Hashem allows us totally to have. That's a different Rambam. That's a Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim who elaborates over this, that we have total free choice. So you can answer the question very simply and nothing to do with our views on worldly issues, rather just to say that the Neder Kavod had really taken them through Edom. They were meant to go through Edom. It wasn't that they went against the Neder Kavod, or it wasn't that they tried to attempt to be independent and do it on their own, which is the proper thing to do at that stage. Rather, Neder Kavod themselves took them towards Edom. The refusal is something of complete free choice. The Neder Kavod, it's not that they couldn't pass through because there was a big mountain there or a wall. That was nothing for Neder Kavod. That's as if it doesn't exist. That was easy to flatten that and go through. That's how they did all the 40 years. But at the point where there's a nation there, and the nation decides not to allow them to go through, that's something that Neder Kavod can't tell in advance, because that's something completely of free choice of human beings, of nations, of whoever it may be, to decide if yes or not.
We were under the Neder Kavod. We kept following. They don't have the right to refuse.
No, we too had free choice. But, right, but we could have chosen not to follow. They said go turn left, and we would turn right. We had free choice. So it was comfortable for them to go along with the Neder Kavod, because the Neder Kavod flattened everything and killed all the animals around, and everything was great for them. So they had no reason to go against it. I'm not comparing to us, to the Jews at that point. I'm saying that it's not a mistake on the Neder Kavod's part to have taken them via that route. It's just that was the closest route to enter Eretz Yisrael, and they could have continued to flatten out the land and make it comfortable for them to go through. It's just that there's the blockage here was not physical, was not natural. It was human beings who were stopping them. That's not something that Neder Kavod could take into account. It's like if Waze tells you to go in a certain route, and suddenly as you're there's a car accident. Hafgana, right? Right, or a car accident. So the Waze couldn't have foreseen that, telling you to go through via that route if it happened suddenly. So that's I think most simple and correct answer to this question. It doesn't even begin the question. because it wasn't the fault of an Kavod for taking them to a dead end. It wasn't really a dead end. It was the fact that there was free choice to Edom not to allow them to go through. Okay. We'll do now, continue our Hilchos Brachos. I understand there's somewhat of confusion with some of the stuff we had spoken about in Brachas, Berman, and Mezonot. I hope that after all, at least generally, the things came into place, and we understand generally most of the at least foundations of Brachas Mezonot. We won't go again and summarize the stuff we've done, but I think in general we have the rules at least. The rules are set well in our head. Each and every specific case has to be dealt with separately, and gladly welcome to ask specifically if you're confronted with the food that you're not sure the bracha is. Gladly welcome to discuss. So we'll go now to the bracha achrona of ala michya over Berman and Mezonot, which is also has different details behind it. Yes.
In practicality, we discussed a certain type of mezonot, a certain amount of mezonot, and it reaches, and it fulfills certain requirements that you would wash.
Oh yes, washing. Yes.
Does that practically come up much? Because I'm having trouble with it.
Okay. I'll just repeat the. Right, it's within this topic because it's bracha achrona, really. Well, both rishona and achrona, washing a motzi and birkas hamazon. Yeah. So Sarah is asking, just to repeat the question for the Zoom. Sarah is asking, does it come up ever that we consume a certain amount of mezonos that would require washing of tilas hadayim, saying the bracha on tilas hadayim, hamotzi, and at the very end, birkas hamazon, instead of mezonos el ala michya. So yes, that is something that can occur to us as we eat certain types of foods and amounts. Truth is, I assume, I didn't check towards the end of the chapter. I assume this will be coming up. Oh, here. Birkat hamazon v'kom ein shalosh. No, that's something different. That's by mistake. It said Birkat hamazon instead of ein shalosh. Let me check just 1 second to see. I'll just give you the general outline of this issue, but I want to just check to see if this appears in the book later on, so we'll know that we're getting the more accurate details later on as we continue. Interesting, I don't see it here. I'll check one last place. Oh, got Amazon. No, actually, it's not. There's small details here and there about this. Oops. Yeah. Sorry, we're in the dark now. You know, turn on the light there. The left top button is for the, yes. Thank you. 1 second, I'll turn the light back on. Oh, okay, thank you. So I'll just give the general outline, but we'll need to learn the details later on. So in order to say Birkat hamazon or motzi and al for mezonos, firstly, it can only reach such a point if we're talking about mezonos that were baked and not cooked. You can eat cooked mezonos, any quantity, any amount, how much you eat, it never become Birkas Hamazon, never become Antias Adayim, never become a Motzi. It's always going to be Mezonos and Ala Michya. That's like for pasta and couscous and all those things. Cooked Mezonos never will become a Motzi. That's helpful in many cases not to reach this point. Baked Mezonah. Normally we say kazait, minimum of a kazait, which is 7 cc volume of Mezonos within 4 minutes, ala michya. The more you eat of baked Mezonos, baked goods Mezonos, till the point where you reach, some say 3 kabetzim, some say 4 kabetzim. A beitza is twice the amount of a kazait. Times 3, so it's 6 times the amount of kazait, or times 4, 8 times the amount of a kazait. That amount, which is approximately it could be the volume of like 150 gram. For some reason now I recall either 220 or 300 gram. How does that work? If we have 3 kabetzi, so it's times 6, so it's 120, more like 150. I have to check the exact amounts of, for some reason I recall 200 and somewhat versus 300 and somewhat. I had to check the exact amounts of the, right, 240 or 300, right? That's somehow vaguely in my mind. Of Mezonos. That's all you need to have to watch. Right.
How many cookies?
It's quite a lot. It's,
Boys sit down to 4 or 5.
I would say like this. I do know, for example, that an average bureka or an average rogalach, you have 6 of those, you've definitely entered that zone of Hamotzi and Birkas Hamazon. That's approximately the amount. Oh, now.
Didn't also have to be flaky, or there were like a few.
No. That has nothing to do with this, with Birkas Hamazon. No, that has to do with to have to say Mezonos within a bread meal. Birkas Hamazon, that's a separate issue, right? Here we're talking about any baked Mezonos. So the amount of, I think also there's around 240 or 300 cc volume. With it now, 1 kazait of that needs to be within 4 minutes. The rest doesn't. You can stretch it out. 1 kazait within 4 minutes, which is nothing. It's very common that you eat such an amount within 4 minutes. So if you have to find out the exact amount volume-wise, but if you have that amount, so again, I do know that around 6 rogalach average or 6 bureka average, that amount of Mezonos would already require washing, hamotzi, and Birkas Hamazon. So now, normally I haven't seen anyone do it, practically speaking, ever, and I haven't seen anyone wash 4 Mezonos. So it's either we don't have those amounts or we're not aware of. So, so that's one. That's the direct definition and criteria for having to say Motzim and Birkas Hamazon. But there's also, besides that, another question. What else gets included within the actual Mezonos to be also part of the amount that makes it require now Birkas Hamazon? Is it only the cake, cookies, bureka, rogalach is only that? Or is it additional foods they're eating together with it? So that's definitely included. The potato and the bureka is definitely included for this idea of kviut suda. This is called, the concept in halacha for this is to eat mezonos kedei kviut suda. You're having enough mezonos that it's like a full meal for you. Right. Yeah, now. No, that has nothing to do with this.
When do you make a separate Mezonos?
Within a bread meal. Right.
Shabbos,
Right. That has nothing to do with this issue. This issue is just the fact that it's not cooked, rather baked. That's the only criteria that that enters or doesn't enter this situation. But now, do we add on to the mezonos all the other foods we're eating? We're having salad, we're having fish, we're having all kinds of other things that are not mezonos at all, like at a kiddush. Exactly. The issue of the kiddush is exactly this issue, because you're having other things. Exactly. So Ashkenazim do include, the Ashkenazi poskim say you do include every type of food. Shlomo Zalman says like this: the definition is any type of food that normally goes together with that type of mezonos you're eating, which means like it's sort of to add flavor. The lapet et pat, same as by bread. So here also the lapet et mezonos, that the mezonos gets added flavor by eating all kinds of other foods around it. So cake and salad doesn't fit together. Oh, but the herring on the cracker, yes. Or altogether, crackers, if you're having crackers which are baked, together with all the foods in the kiddush. Most of the foods in the kiddush fit together with the cracker. The salad also and the hummus. Only fried? I don't think so. Some are very rare. Very rare. Most of them. Yeah. Okay. That's maybe fried, but that's rare. Most crackers are baked. Most crackers are dry and baked. Most of them. At least baked, maybe then fried. But at least they also go through a baking process. Anyhow, so if it's a baked mezonos product, which then to add flavor, you eat all kinds of other foods, all those foods are also part of the amount that would make it hamotzi and rikas hamazon. So that means every kiddush. Almost every kiddush. Right. People don't, I know. People don't. Right. So, I'll bring the book a second that I'm taking this from. This way we'll also find out the exact amount in this book, in Mezonot Bracha. That's where it appears exactly. And I'll read to you the issue of Kiddush. Here, 26. Okay. Okay, first goes through lists of things that are considered cooked and therefore they'll never enter this zone of hamotzi and rikas hamazon. Daisot chamot, like porridge, itriyot l'sugeim, all the noodles and spaghetti, shkadei marak, which are deep fried, that's like cooking, ptitim, couscous, pashida mitriyot, kugel, all these things, because the itriyot, the lokshen of the kugel was cooked, and so on and so forth, all these types of mezonos. Right, the noodles themselves. Now, those that are considered part of this district of hamotzi mezonos is bereka, naknik mitzupe bi'isa, what we call it's like a nikia. Forgot the word. Hot dogs, right? The small hot dogs that are surrounded with dough. Right, moshe b'teva, right. Uga, all the bagel, uga, crackers, ganei boker, cereals, all these are pancakes. These are all mezonos that can reach this situation hamotzi. Oh, now how much is it? For Ashkenazim, he says the following. Let me just see. What did he say? Doesn't give us the amount here. That's weird. I don't see it in gram right now. Okay. Here. They say that in general, it's what people sit down to eat for a full meal. That's the amount. But when you get to the actual measurement, arba kabeitzim. That's what takes you to. Right, but that right. It goes in the end. In the end, we define it amount quantity wise, even if it's not your intention. Sit down for a meal. So 4 kabeitzim, a kabetza is 27 grams. We said it's kazait 54. So yeah, that's around what? No, it's more like the 220. Because 27 times 2 is, you could, kedei kviyut seudah. That's what it should be called, kedei kviyut seudah. 27 is 54 times 4 is 220 approximately. Okay. Now, what do we include in that? Yeah. אדם האוכל כזית פת הבאה בכיסנין, נכנס לספק חיוב ברכת המוציא, אם אוכל עימה עוד מאכלים בשיעור שרגילים לסבוע מהכל יחד. Okay. So, meaning things that you normally eat together with that type of mezonos, that's what gets included in the amount. Oh, now he gets to actual cases. So I get to the kiddush. I want to get to the kiddush.
Each cracker has
Oh, here.
approximately 27 milliliters. They're not writing in grams. Why would they write in liquid?
Yeah, right. That's weird.
One eats only 1 gram cracker. He doesn't make it.
That's something else. Yeah, that's for normal mezonos. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, here, now I'll read to you what he says about Kiddush. הסועד ארוחת צהריים, ואוכל בורקה, אפילו אחד, יחד עם דג, ירקות וכדומה, או משותף בקידוש, שהולכים לבית כנסת בשבת, או בשמחה, שמגישים כיבוד בצורת מזנון בלא פת, עוגה, בורקס וכיוצא בזה, יחד עם סלט, דג, בשר וכדומה. He's having the whole Kiddush, all kinds of foods without eating bread. So he says, לא יאכל כדי קביעות סעודה. Moshe Feinstein says, צריך להיזהר בחתונה, שאינו רוצה ליטול ידיו ולאכול פת, בשביל צריך לחכות לגמר הסעודה זימון, אבל רוצה לאכול מה שיש שם שאר המינים. So you're having a whole meal at a wedding, you don't want to wash, but you're having mezonos together with all the other foods, and you're filling up. So you may need to really wash over this and say amotzi and say Birkas Hamazon. So he says, he gives some eitzot in order not to have to enter this situation. He says, for example, yochal tchila uga v'chadome pachot mishur kviut suda. First, eat the mezonos components of the kiddush. So you may want to have some crackers, you may want to have some cake. Eat the mezonos alone first before you eat all the other foods. V'lo yochal ima dvarim achirim. Don't eat other foods till you can possibly reach the amount of 4 kabeitzim. I know. So, okay, so if you eat the crackers, so eat, let's say, 2 or 3 crackers with the herring and hummus and cheese and all that. But don't start eating the salads and the kugels and all the other parts of the kiddush and the cake. Well, the cake you would want to because you want to eat together with the mezonos. So you have a piece of cake also. But make sure you're not reaching even close to the 4 kabeitzim, to 220 grams. And after you do that, yevarech bracha achrona ala michya, and then yochal ma'achalim nosafim. And then you have to start again. Then you eat the hadama, the shehakos, the ha'etz, all the other foods you can eat as much as you'd like now, because the moment you've got rid of the mezonos, so to speaking, it's no longer connected because you said ala michya, then you can have the rest of the foods as much as you want. Yeah. Say all these meals, wedding, everything. So it's something that people aren't aware of and things that people don't do actually when we see the people. Yes, you
Yeah,
found?
but it does say, שגם מי שמתכוון לקרוא סעודתו על מאפים של מיני מזונות, צריך ליטול ידיים תחילה בברכה, ולברך עליהם המוציא מקרב
Right,
המזון.
right.
So that doesn't matter the amount.
Yeah, if you're sitting down for a meal, but still poskim refer to what is considered a meal that you're having a total of 4 kibetzim. Again, it doesn't need to be from the Mezonos itself. It's all together total. That's what people usually have for a meal. It's around 220 gram total of all the foods they're eating. But if you have, let's say, cake, if you're having just cake, not crackers and not ptitim or something, are
That's good for someone at the wedding, but it's not really at weddings, right?
yeah,
And resort to like have everyone have a proper meal.
yeah,
All the guests that aren't family or whatever.
Right.
Have just tubs and tubs of bereftas, and there's never enough emoji there. And it's really an Indian that these boys, all the yeshiva buses are.
exactly. If they're having,
They can't do that, nobody knows it, they just ignore it. This is exactly what happens at every.
I know, but this is something that's here, clear cut. It says very
So
clear.
there's a way out of it. It doesn't make sense.
No, yes, the Sfardim. Here I have the Sfardim also. Okay. About joining all the other foods together with it. Yes, the Sfardim. Here we have in the same book, Mezonot Bracha. With Sfardim, it says, "Shiur kviut suda u'shiur ba'uga bilvad ve'ein shar ha'ma'achalim ha'nechalim ha'uga mitztarfim l'shiur zeh." So by them, המנהג הוא שאף לכתחילה אין חושבים לצירוף שאר מאכלים. By Sfardim, it has to be the entire amount that is considered kviut suda, only from the Mezonot foods, without adding on all the other foods. So for them, it's much more difficult to reach the amount of. Right, they can eat 6 burekas. True.
I think it's
True.
very easy for all these yeshivas to go through the
Army boys come home.
Like I said, something.
Oh yeah, here he writes the 230 gram of to have that's the amount of Mezonot to eat. Right.
But Steinberg saying that he doesn't, that nobody's.
Everybody say that's a
Right. I know. I don't know why.
It's like lighting in the lamp.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, back to all these cases that we're problematic with. Okay. So that was for that question. Let's now go back to our sequence of
That's part of, yeah, but that's part of barbecue.
that. What's that? What's that? I
Like
didn't
the
hear.
rolls on the air. That's part
Right.
of madhab barbecue. So that's okay not to wash on, but if you're kovei suda,
No, we said that those rolls, according to many poskim, are hamotzi even alone. Exactly. It looks like a roll, they act like a roll, so they're a roll.
Story of
Right.
Aaron,
Uh-huh.
you know, he didn't have it here. Someone
Right.
Sitting near him, didn't, know who he was or anything.
Yeah.
And he got up to wash on his airplane roll.
Yeah.
And the guy next to him said, no, you don't need to wash. And he said, okay, thank you. And he still was like, "Oh, you're asleep. Oh, looks like a roll, but it's not." I said, thank you very much. I'm gonna wash.
I'm still gonna watch. Right. Yeah, that's so totally different because that looks like a roll, acts like a roll, so it is a roll. That's hamotzi even alone, even just a bite.
But things like
But,
that are, let's say, pizza, that's not about
Pizza, that's also not in Israel. It's only when it's
fruit juice. or
needed with
whatever.
fruit juice, right, or milk, and not with just water, right? So that people wash for the amount of kedei kviut suda only. In one slice of the
But that
Mezonos,
people do. That people are
right? That
because it
people
looks
do,
like-
right? And it acts like a meal, really. They feel they're eating a meal, right? But otherwise, people aren't aware of this. Yeah, big question. Okay, let's do a little bit of just the bracha achrona of the normal bracha achrona habala michya. We'll touch on that now, and just a general understanding of when we say, when we don't, and then for next time we'll skip to very practical final parts of this chapter. For Bracha Achrona, to say Alamichya, we need to have eaten kazait within 4 minutes. That's what requires Bracha Rishona, as we said, even a crumb. Bracha Achrona, kazait within 4 minutes. What gets included within that kazait? Let's say if you have a cake. So the flour itself, which is the component that makes the Mezonot and Alamichya, the flour itself could be a minor part or even a major, but you're not having, besides the flour in a cake, you have all the other ingredients. You have the water, you have the sugar, you have the chocolate, you have cinnamon, you have all the other ingredients that made the cake. And now you're just eating the cake as a cake. Is that considered all included within the kazait? Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Because anything that comes to, that's needed. Right. Right. But the point here is not the ability, because you could still calculate how much of the flour you're eating within every bite, within every slice of cake. Even if you can separate it physically, you still know how much of the ingredients are the flour inside and how much of the other ingredients. But the halacha is that we don't care that we're adding on ingredients that aren't really mizonos to be considered part of the measurement of kazai within 4 minutes to have to then say alamichya. Well, how do we decide what yes, what not? Anything that was needed together with the flour to make the dough is considered now part of the measurement to have to say alamichya at the very end, the dough itself. Whereas anything that was spread on top of the dough, like if you have a rogalach, so you have the dough itself, which is needed with sugar and water and all the stuff that's concluded, but then you spread chocolate spread on top of the dough, separate from the dough, or an apple strudel. So you have the dough part and you have the filling.
No, we don't differentiate
Don't differentiate it from Bracha Rishona at all, right? For Bracha Rishona, it's all mizonos included, no matter if there's a filling or it's all needed in the dough to begin with. But for Bracha Achrona, we don't count in any of the ingredients that were added on top of the dough or separate from the dough, even though it's all baked together in the end. So let's say, for example, take a cheesecake. So the dough part, bottom crust, is definitely separate from the majority of the cheese that's there. So we don't count in the component, the ingredients that are added on top of the dough, besides the dough, filling within the dough. We don't add that to the measurement of a kazait within 4 minutes. That is selamichya. So you could be eating a strudel, an apple strudel, a whole piece. You're eating it a little bit slowly, not finishing a whole piece in 2 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. You're eating it slowly. And in the end, you had a kazait of the crust, but now within 4 minutes. And you had all the rest of the filling inside, which did make up to a kazait, but that's not counted in for alamichya. So, but for example, a sponge cake or cakes that are all needed in the dough, like ugat shmarim, yeast cake. That's besides that little bit of chocolate there that's there as a filling. That's not counted in, but a lot of it is dough. So when it's a lot of dough, then you know that's kazai within 4 minutes. That counts and requires the bracha achrona. But when you have those separate amounts, the ingredients is separate within the cake. Some of it is filling, some of it is the dough. You don't count in the filling as part of the measurement. Even take vaflim, for example. Vaflim have very thin layers of mizonos, and in between, they have the chocolate or the lemon taste, whatever vaflim you're eating. So there too, you don't count in those fillings. That's very thin. That's why to get to a kazai within 4 minutes after eating vaflim, you really have to have a lot of vaflim. Depends the size. Sometimes they're those long ones. Sometimes they're the average size small ones. The average size small ones, I would say, would need to have at least six of them within 4 minutes to make alamichya. Yeah, because they're very, very thin, and we don't count the chocolate layers in between the dough layer, in between the wheat layers. So yeah, so you have to have quite a few. By a bureka rogalach, the average size, one average size bureka has enough. Again, you don't count the filling from inside because that's not part of the dough. But even the dough part, one bureka, if you want to make 100% sure that a bureka and a half within 4 minutes is enough to say alamichya, because that has a lot of dough. And so is a average size rogalach enough, 1.5 average size rogalach to make alamichya. Gliliot, for example, those are like roll, right? The round wafers, right? Like a rolled wafer. That needs also to be 6 or 7 of them in order to reach alamichya within 4 minutes, because also the dough part is very thin, and the filling, and nougat flavor or whatever, that filling doesn't count in as part of the measurement. Okay. And one last point for this, and then we will finish the whole issue of Rishon and Achrona for Mezonos. Next time we go into details that are situations that have mixtures of other foods together with the Mezonos for different situations. But one last point. What happens if you have an amount that's less than a kazait of the Mezonos ingredient together with the stuff that isn't considered, that we don't count in as part of the Mezonos? For example, the cheesecake, when you have the crust on the bottom and the cake on top, or the wafers or rogalach that we don't count in the added on filling as part of the Mezonos. What happens if in total you're having a kazait only? You're having in total one kazait, 27 gram volume, and you're not having separate, meaning not the Mezonos part and not the shehakol part separately. None of them make up a kazait on their own. Only together they make up a kazait. What bracha chorah would you say then? You haven't eaten the kazait of the Mezonos, you haven't eaten the kazait of the shehakol, but together in total, you've eaten the kazait. Is there a bracha chorah at all? Oh, so the Ashkenazic ruling is exactly like Amy just said, Borei Nefashot. We take the lower, the more inclusive after bracha. It's not because Borei Nefashot counts for alamichya. We say it doesn't count. If you do by mistake said a Borei Nefashot on a food that requires alamichya, you have to repeat alamichya over, say it separately. Say it again because it didn't count for you. But since in this case, the food itself doesn't reach alamichya nor Borei Nefashos, each one on their own, all together we say that we take the more inclusive bracha, because in the end we had a kazait, we had to bless Hashem over it. So we can't say alamichya, because alamichya is of the higher level, which has nothing to do with the shehakols there. So you say more inclusive bracha, which can cover the Mezonos part since you hadn't eaten the kazait of it. The Sfardim and Rabbi Yosef decided that you don't say any bracha chorah in this. Because of that fact that really Borei Nefashos doesn't really include the Mezonos at all. Because if you made a mistake and you said alamichya, you said Borei Nefashos over alamichya, you said alamichya, it doesn't count. So why so be in what way is it more inclusive? In the end, it doesn't help. It doesn't serve as a bracha chorah for Mezonos. So therefore, he says no bracha chorah in that case. So for Ashkenazim, we say Borei Nefashos. Sfardim, no bracha chorah if we haven't had a kazait separate of each one. You had less than a kazait.
I won't.
What would you say about just having a cheesecake as is when you say Borei Nefashos in the beginning?
So it's bothering me that you're really making it into not
That's where, if you're having just one slice of cheesecake, unless there's enough flour in the cheesecake that when you have, and the crust in the bottom. Okay, so if you have altogether enough to be one slice to be alam yechid, then fine.
Because what we learned until now that Mezonot is whatever it
Overrides
has
everything else.
on the Bracha Rishona. Now
Right.
we're on the Bracha Achorona, it doesn't
Right.
work like that. So
Right, it's
keep
confusing.
it all in your head.
Right,
Even
Right.
on the washing thing, back to that,
yeah,
does it matter if you wash? Because I could see more what happens is you say, oh, I'm gonna have a rugla, and then so you don't wash, and then you have 8 rugla,
right.
and
Or
you
no.
bench even if you didn't wash.
Ah, yes. In the end, if you ate and ate and ate, and you got to the point where it's enough to have to say Birkas Hamazon, you say Birkas Hamazon, even though in the beginning you didn't wash
We
for
never
it.
wash for making Bracha Hamazon on Bracha.
What's that?
You're saying to make the Bracha Hamazon on the Bracha, even though we didn't wash.
Yes, because in the end you have the amount that requires to wash. Right. Even bread that you ate without washing by mistake, you forgot to wash.
Or you ate without making a bracha because you said, I'm only gonna have a little bit, right? You didn't make a bracha until you.
Ah, no, definitely that doesn't
Right,
doesn't interfere with in the end having to say Birkas Hamazon. Right. That's a lechatchila case. You didn't have kabetza, you don't say a bracha over the washing. You just had kazait of bread. You say Birkas Hamazon in the end. It's all defined.
It doesn't, neither could affect me.
Mezonot in any case. Okay, Mezonot in any case. Okay, so that's it for today. Zat Hashem, next time it should be getting more and more simple because we get to all kinds of situations that aren't measurements of this type. Okay, so have a good week. Call to. Bye bye.